My name is Sarah, and I've been a dentist for over 2 decades now. It's a career I love, but the path to get here wasn't easy. As I sit in my office, staring at the framed diploma on the wall, I can't help but reflect on the tumultuous journey that led me to this point. I grew up in a household where I always felt like the second choice. My parents, Jack and Linda, never tried to hide their preference for my younger sister, Emily. She was born when I was 10, and from that moment on, it was clear who the favorite child was. When it came time for college, I knew I wanted to pursue dentistry. It had been my dream since I was a little girl, fascinated by the way my pediatric dentist could make even the scariest procedures feel like magic. "Mom, Dad, I've been accepted to the dental program at State University," I announced one evening at dinner, barely able to contain my excitement. The silence that followed was deafening. My father cleared his throat. "That's nice, Sarah. But you know we can't afford that. We're saving for Emily's future." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. But I've worked so hard. My grades are perfect, I thought. "You thought wrong," my mother cut in, her voice cold. "We've always been clear about our priorities. Emily has a bright future ahead of her. Well, you'll find something suitable, I'm sure." I ran from the table, tears streaming down my face. The next day, I visited my grandparents, Robert and Margaret. They'd always been kinder to me, more understanding. When I told them what happened, my grandfather's face turned red with anger. "Those fools," he muttered. "Don't you worry, Sarah. We'll make sure you get to that school." True to their word, my grandparents scraped together every penny they could to help me with tuition. I worked multiple jobs, studied harder than I ever had before, and eventually graduated at the top of my class. During my final year of dental school, I met Tom. He was charming, handsome, and seemed to genuinely care about me. We married shortly after graduation, despite my parents' objections. "You're making a mistake," my mother hissed at me during the reception. "He's not good enough for this family." I ignored her, convinced that for once in my life, I'd made the right choice. How wrong I was. The first few years were good. We had 2 beautiful children, Max and Lily, and I started building my dental practice. But as time went on, Tom changed. The charming man I'd fallen in love with disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. It started with the drinking. A beer or 2 after work became a 6-pack, then a bottle of whiskey. He'd come home late, reeking of alcohol, picking fights over nothing. I endured it for years, hoping he'd change back into the man I'd married. But one night, as I watched him nearly drop our infant daughter while in a drunken stupor, I knew it was over. The divorce was messy, but in the end, I got custody of the kids and kept my practice. The day I told my parents about the divorce, I foolishly hoped for some support. Instead, I was met with cold disappointment and blame. "I'm sure you're exaggerating," my mother said, her voice dripping with disdain. "Tom always seemed like such a nice man. You probably drove him to drink with your nagging." That was the last straw. I gathered my children and left, vowing never to seek their approval again. Meanwhile, my sister Emily's life seemed picture-perfect. She'd become a psychologist, married a successful businessman named David, and had 2 boys of her own. My parents never missed an opportunity to remind me how much better she was doing. "Emily just bought a new house in that fancy neighborhood," my mother would casually mention during our increasingly rare phone calls. "Her practice is really taking off. It's so nice to have a daughter we can be proud of." Years passed, and I built a successful dental practice. I was doing well financially, even able to buy a nice apartment in a good area of town. Ironically, there were times when my parents would call, asking for money. "Sarah, your father and I are a bit short this month. We were hoping you could help out," my mother would say, her tone sugary sweet. Despite everything, I always sent them what they needed. Part of me hoped that by being generous, they might finally see my worth. But their attitude never changed. One day, I received a call from Emily. Our parents had passed away suddenly in a car accident. I was devastated, not just by their loss, but by the realization that we'd never have a chance to reconcile. "I'm in the Maldives with David," Emily said, her voice crackling over the international line. "Could you handle the funeral arrangements? We'll try to get back as soon as we can." So there I was, planning my parents' funeral while my sister lounged on a beach halfway across the world. I threw myself into the task, determined to give them a beautiful send-off despite our troubled relationship. The day of the funeral arrived, and Emily finally showed up, tanned and seemingly carefree. Right after the funeral, a lawyer approached us. "We need to discuss the will." I hadn't even thought about the will. Surely, despite everything, my parents wouldn't completely forget about me? But as the lawyer read out the details, it became clear that they had done exactly that. Everything, the house, their savings, even family heirlooms, had been left to Emily. There wasn't so much as a mention of my name. As I drove home that day, I made a decision. I was done seeking approval from people who would never give it. I had my children, my career, and my own life. It was time to live it on my terms. After the funeral, my relationship with Emily became even more distant. We rarely spoke, save for obligatory holiday greetings and birthday wishes via Skype. I'd catch glimpses of my nephews, Tommy and Jake, during these calls, but it was hardly enough to form a real relationship with them. From what I could see, the boys were growing up to be quite a handful. During one memorable video call, I watched a 6-year-old Tommy throw a tantrum because Emily wouldn't buy him a new tablet. "But I want it now," he screamed, his face red with anger. Emily just smiled indulgently. "Now, sweetie, we can't always get what we want right away. We'll talk about it later, okay?" I couldn't help but interject. "Emily, don't you think you should be a bit firmer with him? That behavior isn't appropriate for his age." My sister's face hardened. "I'm a psychologist, Sarah. I think I know how to raise my children without causing childhood trauma. They need to feel free to express themselves." As the years went by, my own children grew up and moved out to start their own lives. Max became a successful software engineer, while Lily followed in my footsteps and went to dental school. I was immensely proud of them both. With the kids gone, I found myself enjoying the quiet life of an empty nester. I adopted a cat, Mr. Whiskers, who quickly became my constant companion. My days fell into a comfortable routine of work, home, and the occasional dinner with friends. Then, one rainy Tuesday evening, my peaceful life was shattered by a frantic knocking at my door. I opened it to find Emily standing there, mascara running down her face, with Tommy and Jake in tow. "Sarah," she sobbed, "I need your help. David and I had a huge fight, and I just need a place to stay for a while." I hesitated for a moment, remembering all the years of hurt and neglect. But looking at my sister's tear-stained face and the confused expressions of my nephews, I knew I couldn't turn them away. "Come in," I said, stepping aside to let them enter. As they filed into my apartment, I got my first real look at Tommy and Jake in years. Tommy, now 9, had a sullen look on his face, while 6-year-old Jake was bouncing off the walls, touching everything in sight. "Jake, honey, please don't touch that," I said gently as he reached for an antique vase. He ignored me completely, knocking the vase to the floor where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. Emily barely reacted. "Oh, boys will be boys," she said with a weak laugh. "We'll replace it, won't we, Jake?" Jake just shrugged and moved on to the next breakable object. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that they were guests in my home and that this was just temporary. But as days turned into weeks, it became clear that Emily had no intention of leaving anytime soon. My once tidy apartment descended into chaos. Toys and clothes were strewn everywhere, the walls were covered in crayon drawings, and the constant noise was driving me to my wits' end. One particularly trying afternoon, I returned home from a long day at the dental office to find my living room in complete disarray. The floor was littered with toys, crushed snacks, and what appeared to be the stuffing from one of my throw pillows. In the center of it all sat Tommy and Jake, gleefully engaged in what looked like a food fight with my good china as ammunition. "Boys!" I exclaimed, shock and frustration evident in my voice. "What on earth are you doing?" They barely glanced in my direction, continuing their rambunctious play without missing a beat. I looked around frantically for Emily, finally spotting her lounging on the balcony, engrossed in her phone. "Emily," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady, "have you seen what the boys are doing?" She glanced up briefly, a look of mild annoyance crossing her face. "They're just playing, Sarah. Don't be such a killjoy." I took a deep breath, counting to 10 in my head before speaking again. "Emily, they're destroying my home. This has to stop." Emily rolled her eyes and reluctantly got up from her chair. She sauntered into the living room, surveying the chaos with a disinterested eye. "All right, boys, that's enough for now. Why don't you go watch some TV?" The boys cheered and raced off to the guest room, leaving the mess behind. I stared at my sister in disbelief. "That's it? You're not going to make them clean up?" "Oh, relax," Emily said dismissively. "I'll take care of it later. You're always so uptight, Sarah. It's not good for your blood pressure." As the days wore on, I found myself becoming more and more stressed. The constant noise, the mess, the lack of respect for my home and my rules, it was all taking a toll on me. Even Mr. Whiskers, my usually affectionate cat, had taken to hiding under my bed most of the time, only emerging for food and to use his litter box. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, a task that had somehow fallen solely to me despite Emily and the boys being my guests, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mrs. Johnson, my elderly neighbor from the floor below, standing there with a stern expression on her face. "Dr. Sarah," she began, her voice tight with barely contained anger. "I've always considered you a model neighbor, but these past few weeks have been unbearable. The noise from your apartment is constant. I can hear screaming and things breaking at all hours of the day and night. What on earth is going on up here?" I felt my face flush with embarrassment. "I'm so sorry, Mrs. Johnson. My sister and her children are staying with me temporarily, and I'm afraid the boys can be a bit energetic." Mrs. Johnson's expression softened slightly. "I understand children can be lively, dear, but this goes beyond that. And it's not just the noise. Have you seen what they've done to the hallway?" She gestured for me to follow her. We walked to the stairwell, and I gasped in horror. The walls were covered in graffiti, crude drawings, and misspelled words spray-painted in garish colors. I recognized Tommy's handiwork immediately. This is unacceptable," I stammered, mortified. "I had no idea." "I'll clean it up right away, Mrs. Johnson. And I promise, it won't happen again." "See that it doesn't," she replied firmly. "Otherwise, I'm afraid I'll have to report this to the building management and the appropriate authorities." Once she was out of sight, I leaned against the wall, overwhelmed by the mess my life had become. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and marched back to my apartment. As I opened the door, I was met with the sound of Tommy and Jake's laughter, punctuated by the crash of something else breaking. "Boys," I said firmly, "turn that off. We have work to do." They ignored me, as usual. I strode over and switched off the TV. "Hey," Tommy protested. "We were playing that." "Not anymore," I replied. "You're going to clean up the mess you made in the hallway. Come with me, now." Grumbling and whining, they followed me to the stairwell. I handed them scrub brushes and a bucket of soapy water. "Start cleaning," I instructed. They stared at me in disbelief. But Mom said we don't have to do chores," Tommy stammered. "Your mom isn't here right now," I said. "And in my house, we clean up our messes." They half-heartedly swiped at the walls, more interested in splashing each other than actually cleaning. I was about to intervene when I heard footsteps on the stairs. To my surprise, it was Mrs. Johnson's son, Mark, in his police uniform. He must have just gotten off duty. "Everything okay here, Dr. Sarah?" he asked, eyeing the boys suspiciously. Sensing an opportunity, I explained the situation. Mark's face hardened as he turned to Tommy and Jake. "Listen up, boys," he said sternly. "Vandalism is a serious offense. If you don't clean this up properly, we're going to have some real problems. Understand?" The boys' eyes widened in fear. They nodded vigorously and began scrubbing the walls with newfound enthusiasm. I was supervising their progress when I heard the elevator ding. Emily stepped out, fresh from a trip to the beauty salon, her hair and nails immaculate. Her jaw dropped when she saw the scene before her. "What the hell is going on here?" she shrieked. I calmly explained the situation, but Emily wasn't having it. "How dare you force my children to do manual labor?" she yelled. "This is cruel and unusual punishment." "Cruel?" I shot back, my patience finally snapping. "Cruel is letting them destroy other people's property without consequences." Emily grabbed the boy's hands. "Come on, we're leaving. I won't let you be subjected to this abuse." The next few days were tense. Emily and the boys stayed, but they barely spoke to me. I was starting to think things couldn't get any worse. I was wrong. I came home from work one afternoon to find my apartment eerily quiet. "Hello?" I called out. A pitiful meow answered me. I followed the sound to find Mr. Whiskers huddled in a corner, his fur a startling shade of blue. "Oh my God," I gasped. The poor cat was covered in paint, frantically trying to lick it off. I screamed in horror and anger. Scooping up Mr. Whiskers, I wrapped him in a towel and rushed him to the vet, my heart pounding. The vet's diagnosis was grim. "He's ingested a significant amount of paint," she told me. "We'll need to keep him overnight for treatment." Leaving Mr. Whiskers at the clinic was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I returned home, shaking with fury. Emily was lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone. I explained to her what happened to Mr. Whiskers, demanding she discipline the boys and help clean up the mess they'd made. Emily shrugged. "It's just a cat, Sarah. Don't be so dramatic." I couldn't believe my ears. "Just a cat? He could die, Emily." "Well, that's not my problem," she said dismissively. "And neither is the cleaning. It's your apartment, after all." The next morning, I arrived at my dental practice earlier than usual. My mind was reeling from the events of the past few weeks, and I knew I needed to get to the bottom of this situation. With a deep breath, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. "David, I'm sorry to bother you," I began, "but I need to understand what's going on. Why did you and Emily have a fight? When is she planning to come back home?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. Then, David let out a heavy sigh. "Sarah, I'm afraid Emily won't be coming back. We're getting divorced." David's story came pouring out, each revelation more shocking than the last. He told me how Emily had quit her psychology practice years ago, refusing to work or even help around the house. Their home had fallen into disrepair, and the children were completely out of control. "And then there were the vacations," he went on. "She'd jet off without me or the kids, using the money from your parents' inheritance. I thought she was just taking some time for herself, but..." His voice trailed off, and I felt a chill run down my spine. "But what, David?" "She was cheating on me, Sarah. Multiple times, with different men. God, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I had to get a DNA test for the boys. Thankfully, they're mine, but after all that, I just couldn't do it anymore. I filed for divorce and asked her to leave." After finishing the call with David, I sat at my desk, trying to process everything I'd learned. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Emily wasn't planning on leaving anytime soon. She was using me as a fallback, a free place to stay while her life fell apart. That evening, I confronted Emily. The boys were in the guest room, engrossed in their video games as usual, while Emily lounged on my couch, scrolling through her phone. "Emily, we need to talk," I said firmly, sitting across from her. "I spoke to David today." "Is it true? Are you really getting divorced?" Emily shrugged, an air of indifference about her. "Yeah, it's true. David and I are over. I'm tired of him and his expectations. But don't worry, sis. You'll help me out, right? After all, that's what sisters are for. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Help you out? Emily, you've turned my life upside down. You're not even trying to get back on your feet. What about your inheritance? Surely you can use that to find your own place. She laughed dismissively. Oh, that money? It's gone, Sarah. There were barely crumbs left anyway. I felt my blood begin to boil. Crumbs? Emily, our parents left you over $200,000. How could you possibly have blown through all that money? Emily just shrugged again, reaching for her phone. Life's expensive, Sarah. You wouldn't understand. In that moment, something inside me snapped. Years of resentment, weeks of frustration, all came bubbling to the surface. No, you're the one who doesn't understand, I said, my voice low and controlled. I've had enough. Get a job, start disciplining the boys, contribute to this household, or get out. You have 1 week, Emily. 1 week to show me you're serious about turning things around. Emily's eyes widened in shock. For the first time since she'd arrived, she seemed to realize I wasn't going to back down. A few days after my ultimatum to Emily, I returned home from a long day at the dental office. As I approached my apartment door, I was struck by an unusual silence. No shouting, no crashes, no sounds of destruction. It was peaceful. Warily, I entered the apartment. Emily? I called out. No response. I found Tommy and Jake sitting quietly on the couch, their eyes red and puffy as if they'd been crying. My heart sank. Boys? Where's your mother? I asked gently. Tommy wordlessly handed me a piece of paper. With trembling hands, I unfolded it and began to read. Dear Sarah, I've realized that motherhood just isn't for me. I'm still young and I want to live my life. I've met someone, he's young, exciting, and doesn't have any baggage. We're leaving town together. You're always going on about responsibility and all that boring stuff, so here's your chance to put your money where your mouth is. The boys are your problem now. You're an old maid anyway, so you might as well be useful and raise them. Don't try to contact me. By the time you read this, I'll be long gone. Emily. I collapsed onto the sofa, my mind reeling. How could she do this? How could she abandon her own children? With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. When he answered, I could barely get the words out. David, it's Sarah. You need to come over right away. It's about the boys. Within an hour, David was at my door. I handed him Emily's note without a word. As he read it, his face cycled through shock, anger, and finally, a deep sadness. Oh, boys, he sighed, kneeling down to hug Tommy and Jake. I'm so sorry. Over the next few hours, David and I talked, trying to figure out what to do. It was clear that the boys needed stability, and David was determined to provide that. I'll take them home, he said firmly. And first thing tomorrow, I'm going to file for full custody. I nodded, relief washing over me. I think that's for the best. And David, I'll help in any way I can. I'll testify, provide character witnesses, whatever you need. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings. David filed for full custody, and I found myself recounting Emily's behavior to stern-faced judges and social workers. In the end, the decision was swift. Emily, who never even showed up for the hearings, was stripped of her parental rights. David was granted full custody of Tommy and Jake. As the dust settled, I found myself adjusting to a new normal. I visited David and the boys often, marveling at the changes in their household. David had hired a part-time nanny to help out, but he was also making a concerted effort to be more present in his sons' lives. One sunny Saturday, about a month after everything had happened, I visited their home. I was amazed to find Tommy setting the table for lunch, while Jake was helping David prepare sandwiches in the kitchen. Aunt Sarah, they both cried, running to hug me. I embraced them tightly, noticing how much calmer and happier they seemed. They're doing so well, I remarked to David as we watched the boys play in the backyard after lunch. You're doing a great job. 5 years have passed, and life has taken unexpected turns. I'm still practicing dentistry, finding fulfillment in my work and enjoying quiet evenings with Mr. Whiskers, my faithful feline companion. Tommy, now 14, has become something of a local celebrity. His graffiti art, once a source of frustration, has evolved into a genuine talent. He's a popular blogger, showcasing his work online and even getting featured in the news. His success has brought him a decent income, unusual for someone his age. One Sunday afternoon, David and the boys were visiting me for our weekly family dinner. We were catching up on Tommy's latest art project when there was an unexpected knock at the door. To everyone's shock, it was Emily. She barged in, eyes fixed on Tommy. I hear you're making quite a bit of money now, she said, her voice sickly sweet. Mommy needs her share. David stepped forward, his face stern. You have no right to any of it, Emily. He pulled out a document from his wallet. You were stripped of your parental rights years ago. Leave now, or I'm calling the police. Emily's face contorted with anger, but seeing our united front, she turned and left without another word. We haven't seen her since. As for me, I continue to work and enjoy life's simple pleasures. I stay in touch with my own children, now adults themselves, cherishing our relationship. This unexpected journey has taught me the true meaning of family. It's not always about blood, but about love, support, and being there for each other through thick and thin.